The magic of the API is that it's one interface or one kind of API, and it interacts with 40 plus blockchains on the back end. So it doesn't matter if your data is on Polygon or Ethereum or Avalanche or Optimism or Arbitrum, the list just goes on. We normalize and canonicalize all of that data under that one interface.
In a multi-chain world, data on blockchain is difficult to access, especially at the speed and detail that users expect. Covalent solves this problem while maintaining the decentralized ethos of blockchains, ensuring that this data is always accessible. To further discuss the interesting work being done by the team at Covalent and how they are disrupting the multi-chain future and solving the data puzzle, leveraging the distributed ledger technology, we have Ganesh Swami with us today, who's the founder and CEO of Covalent. Ganesh has been a serial entrepreneur with a rich experience in managing data for over a decade. He will be sharing his journey and some key insights from the digital asset space with us today. Welcome to CuratedX, Ganesh. We are truly stoked to have you with us.
Chavi, it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Lovely. Let's get things started. So Web3 is an emerging field, Ganesh, right? With multiple use cases unleashed and many more still being explored. So would love to know how you got acquainted with Web3 and digital assets, and how did that idea of venturing into Covalent came to you?
It's a great question. So I've been in the data space for over a decade, mostly in the database engineering and data management areas of startups. And about 4 years ago, just to scratch my personal itch, I went to a hackathon and I built a connector that allows you to read data from blockchains without having to download the blockchain or understanding any of the consensus algorithms or anything that's complicated. So literally, you can put Excel and get all of the transactions in Excel, and just built this very simple prototype in 2 days and ended up winning that hackathon. And back then, there was not a lot of use cases. It wasn't even called Web3. There was no DeFi, there was no NFTs, no GameFi, none of that stuff. But I felt like this is something that was required. And it comes from my experience in the traditional data space, where a lot of the workloads were moving from on-prem deployments to the cloud. And enterprises and businesses, they're not going to retrain their people. They're not going to retool their people. They're not going to change their processes. They just need this kind of like connector or middleware that facilitates that transition. And just the gravity and inertia in adopting new technologies. So that's why I felt like this is something that needed to be built. And I built it at a hackathon with another person in like a couple of days, and ended up winning that hackathon. And that's when I realized that maybe there's legs to this. Maybe there's a potential for a startup here that could be very interesting. And then ended up starting Covalent. So the word covalent comes from covalent bonds in chemistry, where my apologies to your audience if they have not so fun memories from high school, but covalent bonds binds molecules. So here we have databases and blockchains, or centralized systems and decentralized systems. So it's that connector or that binding element. So this is back in 2017, late 2017. The timing was really bad because that's just when the ICO boom had died out and it was a multi-year bear market. But the two founders were just sat down and built through the bear market. And when the actual adoption and the traction picked up, right time, right team, right product, right market, and Covalent just exploded. So it's quite accidental, my entry into the space, but it was a conviction that this kind of technology is first focused on utility, and our conviction, because we were bootstrapped for the first 2.5 years, so we had no outside funding, let us live through that bear market, and here we are.
Lovely. Sounds very interesting. It's surprising that accidentally you end up with something and you work on it with conviction, realizing that, okay, this is something where there's a gap in the market and we need to build on this. So absolutely lovely. And as we know, right, data is the key to make the entire stack of blockchain interoperable in the real sense. And only with data, there will be ease of communication across chains. And as the ecosystem grows, so does the need to latch on to a protocol that enables such functionality. So if you can briefly talk about Covalent and what is the differentiating factor, And also, in addition to that, how do you see subnets as an opportunity for the next wave of growth of Covalent?
Absolutely. So what Covalent today is, it's a unified API for developers to pull out positions and balances and historical granular transaction activity. So the magic of the API is that it's one interface or one kind of API, and it interacts with 40 plus blockchains on the back end. So it doesn't matter if your data is on Polygon or Ethereum or Avalanche or Optimism or Arbitrum, the list just goes on. We normalize and canonicalize all of that data under that one interface. So developers really love it because it's like going to Europe and speaking one language and all the countries understand. Or in the case, even in India, you speak one language. I know that there's no one language. If you speak Hindi, you can't really survive in the South. You speak English, you probably can't survive in other places. So there's no unified language, but that's what we're trying to do with blockchain data. So developers love this because they just integrate with Covalent once, and then boom, they have access to all of the data across all of the different blockchains. So that's what Covalent, the API is. And this API is pretty mature. We have about 25,000 devs. We have over 3,000 applications on the API. All best-in-class applications use the API today for their needs, mostly in the wallet space, the taxation space, the NFT space, GameFi. So those are our big use cases. So that's what the Covalent API is. Now, Covalent itself is a network, right? So it's not different from Uber. So how Uber works is there's the supply side, so the drivers who have cars who are roaming around the streets and they're willing to offer ride sharing. And you have the demand side with the riders demanding the ride sharing service. And so without the supply or without the demand, the network has no value, right? If you have riders on the street and no drivers, then it's going to be a faulty experience. And if the drivers are roaming around and there are no riders to consume that ride sharing service, again, it's a mismatch. So Covalent is the same thing. The supply is from all the blockchains, right? So today we've indexed about 40 blockchains. There's actually hundreds of blockchains out there. And the demand is all of these developers consuming this data. Now, what is interesting with the architecture of blockchains is that this is where, I have, I underestimated the value of blockchains. So I thought way back, 4 years ago that, there's maybe like 4 or 5 blockchains. Like, what do you need more than 5 blockchains, right? There's no need, like it's all kind of the same. But I think now there's going to be in the thousands of blockchains, and we've only indexed 40. I think this time next year will be around 200. So that's really what the pace is. And so the key change that's happening here is that people have fundamentally understood that the blockchains themselves don't scale. And one way to scale that is to create app chains. So this is the new architecture that is moving on the supply side. So if you look at Avalanche, Avalanche is coming up with their subnets. So essentially, each application will get its own blockchain, and then they settle on top of the C chain, the Avalanche main chain. And the application is not competing with other applications for gas, right? So your DeFi is not competing with GameFi, it's not competing with other kinds of use cases. Polygon is doing the same kind of architecture. They call them supernets, and there's going to be like hundreds of supernets that are settling against Polygon. Binance is doing the same thing. Cosmos came up with this very innovative architecture many years ago. So Cosmos as a hub, and there's Cosmos zones. There's probably hundreds of Cosmos zones live today, and they're all like talking to each other through the Cosmos hub. Every system is moving to this kind of architecture. Arbitrum is doing the same thing. Optimism is doing the same thing. So this is a very exciting future. So we'll be able to scale to hundreds of blockchains in the future. So it's almost like the more data there is, the harder the problem becomes in indexing and curating all this information. And the more valuable the data is, and the more valuable the data is, the more the developers come in. So it's like a flywheel, right? The supply drives the demand drives the supply, and so on. So these days, we don't actually go and cold call blockchains and outreach and tell them, hey, we should add Covalent support. Most of the demand on the supply side, like the blockchains, come to us because they want access to this 25,000 developer pool. So yeah.
Great. Very interesting. I think how you simplify it and can actually explain how the demand and supply aspects work together, and also both need to work in tandem to actually achieve something. And once you have that huge database already built, right, it's very easy to get that same thing replicated in newer blockchains and scale up the business further. Lovely. So decentralization, as we know, is at the core of building using blockchain technology and giving power back to the community token holders, ensuring the long-term success of any project. On similar lines, how did you decide to go live with the Covalent network, enabling CQT staking and move on to the path of decentralization? And when did you figure out that this is the right time to do it?
It's a great question, Chavi. So let's peel back the layers on this decision process. And this has been around, like, we made this choice 2 years ago. So first 2 years, we built this centralized system. So it's almost like a SaaS-like software. And customers would pay us for the API and they would consume the API. It's not different from any other SaaS software, nothing novel about that business model. But 2 years ago, we realized that whatever we had built back then has a potential to really change the world, like be the dominant standard and be the open platform, the open standard for all blockchain data. So it's a very conscious choice. It's also a much harder problem to solve. And my co-founder and I, we are serial entrepreneurs, right? So we've seen all of these other kinds of business models, and some of them have been very successful, some of them not so successful. But we wanted to build something that would outlive us, right? That would live for the next 100 years. So that's when we decided, let's actually build a decentralized network and let's give the power back to the community, and let's not make it centralized, not make the control just the founding team and the management team. Let's actually let it run and build a public good which uplifts all of society. So that was a choice that we made. And now the scale of the problem that we're trying to solve is, I would say, 100 times more complicated, 100 times more difficult, 100 times more risky. And that is the journey that we embarked on about 2 years ago. And it's taken a lot of hard work here, lots of missteps, lots of right choices that we've made, but successfully, as of May, the decentralized network launched. So phase 1, where we are able to stake the token, launched after 2 years of hard work. And so now parts of the Covalent technology is now run by 12 independent operators or validators, and it's not under the control of Covalent anymore, at least that first phase. And progressively over the next couple of months, each phase is going to launch, and then at the end of 4 phases, which should probably take about a year, Covalent V, the company, is not controlling the system anymore. It's this decentralized network of people, and they're making the governance calls. They're running all the extraction process, the cleansing, the normalization. And this is now almost like a gift to the world, like a Wikipedia kind of thing, where anyone can come in and tap the data. And there's other fundamental technical innovation underneath, which we may or may not go into. But that's really the choice that we made about 2 years ago. Now, one question you do have to ask any project is, why decentralization, right? And a lot of projects don't really have that multi-year, multi-decade kind of vision on why they want to decentralize. Like a lot of projects, they just say, hey, let's release a token, raise some capital, and do some decentralization, and then it's a dead end, right? So for us, decentralization, there's a multitude of answers. One is decentralization leads to censorship-resistant software, right? So you can't censor anyone. The other thing is permissionless nature. So there are people who cannot open bank accounts. There are people who cannot participate in investment decisions. There are people, it's all permission, right? You need to be born in the right geography. You need to have the right credentials. You need to be in the right networks. So permissionless nature. The other thing is unstoppable nature. So Ethereum, for example, over the last 6 years, it's had no downtime. Right? So it's unstoppable. It has 100% uptime. It's always running. So that's, again, a very novel feature. Another really interesting thing is the security of cryptography, right? So ensuring that the data is immutable and secure, and you outsource that security not to banks and not to lawyers and not to contracts, but to mathematics and cryptography. So here, we didn't really pick permissionless or censorship resistant. We picked the security, which is tamper-proof and proof-based, and the unstoppable nature. So if we realize our vision over the next couple of months, then the Covalent network nobody can take it down. It's going to be running forever. And the data cannot be tampered because cryptography ensures that it's very secure. So hopefully that gives you some color on why decentralization and why it personally matters to us at Covalent.
It definitely does. Thank you for explaining this so well. And first of all, heartiest congratulations on a very successful launch. And I hope it helps scaling Covalent to even further greater heights. And it's lovely how you have that path clear in your mind and you break down why decentralization is needed and important to us. It's not the herd behavior that, okay, everybody is going decentralized. That's why we do it. But security is at the key and is the most important aspect that you consider. That's how it will help you in scaling up as well. And it's brilliant how you have that clarity set in your mind that this is the objective that we are going after. Also, Ganesh, there is so much volatility in crypto markets, right? That only the strong and robust systems stand the test of time, survive the bear markets as we see right now as well, and build to provide maximum value to the users. So building on that, where do you foresee Covalent in the next couple of years?
So I'm proud to say that Covalent is a bear market baby. What that means is that the code that is running today were written during the darkest and the deepest moments of the bear market in 2018 and 2019, when there was no market, no traction, no investors writing checks. It was just our conviction that propelled us forward. So my statement to a lot of builders and a lot of investors out there is just zoom out, right? So don't think about all-time high to all-time high, right? So let's take Ethereum, for example. It was the high was like 4,500, right? $4,500. And then now it's something like $1,800. But back then, the low was $80 during the bear market, which was in 2018. And then, so what you actually need to compare is not the high to the high, but the low to the low, the trough to the trough. So 80 to 1800 is actually a pretty good progress bar, right? So the high is all like volatility. So if you zoom out and look at, year after year after year, the low point is actually going up. That is how you can zoom in and focus. So that's my first statement. Now with Covalent, it's a very, very, very interesting position right now. So we have the balance sheet to support a multi-year roadmap, right? We are actually not slowing down anything. We're not slowing down hiring. We're not slowing down anything on that front, right? We are continue to execute against our plan. Now, there's a macro condition that is coming around, but a lot of the things that we do at Covalent is a multi-year roadmap. It's not like we can build a decentralized network in the next 6 months, right? It took us about 2 years to get to phase one. So it's going to take us like multiple years to realize our vision. And if you're patient and if you're in tune with what we are building, then Covalent is not going anywhere, right? When we were able to survive when we had no money and no traction and no investors, now with all the money and the traction and the investors and the team that is dedicated, then so I had the saying that what goes down has to go up. So it's the inverse of like the other. So there will be another cycle. Nobody knows whether it's going to be in 6 months or a year, but it doesn't matter, right? So the next cycle will come in, and then Covalent will just grow with that, and then we're not really building like a GameFi solution or a DeFi solution or an NFT solution. We're an indexed bet, so it doesn't really matter what the flavor of the day is. There will be utility for Covalent because data is the underlying story behind all of these traction proof points.
Lovely. I think I have to take that from you, that what goes down has to go up. And for a protocol like that, which is actually uniting the entire blockchain network, it's definitely going to survive the different phases of the markets. And we're definitely going to compare, next time at least, I'm surely going to compare a chart comparing the lows with the lows and see what stands the test of time. So there is also a varying degree of acceptance of digital assets across the globe with regards to maybe ease of business, regulations, taxation, and a lot of other things. So in your view, what are some of the emerging economies that you are bullish on that can benefit from the Web3 and digital assets revolution?
It's a great question. So I'm hyper bullish on digital assets. And my thesis is that in the next 10 years or so, every business will have digital assets on their balance sheet. Whether they're a crypto or a blockchain company, doesn't matter. It's just like every company has a website today. It might be a forestry company. It might be like a heavy machine industry company. It doesn't matter. They all have websites or they all use email, right? So uh, digital assets will be ubiquitous just like that. And if you scale that back and figure out, what is actually interesting here, now all of the trends that are coming out is like super exciting. So DeFi, I would say DeFi is super, super exciting. But the real magic here is when fintech and DeFi merges. The underlying problem with a lot of the blockchains today is that there's not enough traction, not enough users, not enough real world users beyond the speculative phase, right? Which is fine. Any nascent new technology has speculators, and then eventually the use cases emerge. So here, when fintech and DeFi merge, suddenly the total addressable market explodes to the billions of users. So you're starting to see early signs of this. Robinhood, which is a very popular trading app, recently added a Web3 like wallet. Coinbase is now mainstream. So a lot of things are happening there where fintech and DeFi are merging. The next thing is NFTs. NFTs are super interesting. So right now, I would say NFTs are exciting because for the first time, digitally native artists have a platform to showcase their artwork. So thus far, it hasn't been possible. They're still using analog processes. They're still using, like online websites. It's not digitally native. So this is like super exciting. But I think NFTs with these NFT as art is just the first iteration of NFTs utility. If you think about NFTs, they're essentially one of one kind of like deal. So you can actually get invoices, you can get accounts receivable, you can get accounts payable, you can get intellectual property, trademarks, all kinds of assets that are represented by NFTs. And that's when just imagine you have your accounts receivable that you need to collect from your vendors, and then you pool all of your accounts receivable as NFTs, and then you trade them, or you put them down as a collateral, or you get like a revenue stream. And that's when the composability of the stuff really unlocks. So these are things that we are looking forward to. Then of course, you have GameFi, which are reimagining the traditional AAA gaming experience to give the ownership back to the users. So there's still early days. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. Blockchains still have to scale, on ramps have to scale, but it's all coming together. I think that's the next cycle's story. Beyond that, there's central bank digital currencies. There's lots and lots of use cases. So it's not just like one use case that you're waiting for. It's not like 2018 or 2019. Now there's like at least half a dozen use cases that are in the multi-billion dollar, addressable market, which is all going to explode over the coming years. And so, yeah, it's a pretty exciting space to be.
Absolutely. I would just take one step ahead from there. Like you mentioned, right, there's a lot of work happening across the board, maybe with regards to custody solutions, bringing together fintech with DeFi protocols, NFTs, gaming, metaverse, digital identities, and so much more. So if I ask you your top 3 projects that you admire or are really positive about, obviously except Covalent, what would those be? Not as a financial advice, but just your opinion on the basis of the problem that they're solving.
Absolutely. So I'm strong on I like projects with a strong vision that don't waver from their vision. So my number one project, I'm definitely no secret that I'm a huge fan is Ethereum. So Ethereum has a multi-year long roadmap, and the set of choices they've gone for is absolute 100% decentralization. So it's questionable if whether it's a research project or if it's an actual go to market like a product. At sometimes those lines blur, but I'm a huge fan of the ethos and the community around Ethereum. So they're all very selfless. They're all been working on this for multiple years, and it's exciting to see the merge happen yesterday, and the mainnet merge will happen in a couple of weeks, couple of months, which is exciting to see. So Ethereum is my number one. Number two for me is Uniswap. Uniswap is an exchange. It popularized a style of exchange called AMM, so automated market making. And there's no order book there. So that's what's novel about that system. But it was built by a guy who's a mechanical engineer. He was just like, it's just an itch. And then he just built this and then deployed it. And today, Uniswap is the dominant decentralized exchange, which is out there. So in Coinbase, if you need to go and list your token, it's going to take 6 months of work. There's going to be a lot of due diligence. It's very expensive to list them. You have to go through their framework. Same with Binance and all these exchanges. On Uniswap, I just go to their website and list my token. That's it, right? So the number of assets that Uniswap has is over 100,000 assets. And that's incredible. Like Coinbase, maybe what it has, 5,000 assets, not even 5,000 assets. So this is the long tail kind of like motion. So super interesting. And it has like completely censorship resistant, completely permissionless. You cannot upgrade the contracts. Once it's deployed, it's frozen. So it's like what true decentralization means. So that's like a super exciting kind of project. The third project I really like is Polygon. Polygon, I've known the founders for many, many years. And I think these guys not only have the great tech, but what I admire about the Polygon team is they're just genuinely nice people. So I've known the founding team for many years. And in 2019, Sandeep gave me a lot of good advice on how to survive, how to live through the bear market, when all of the other investors, all of the other guys say, hey, Ganesh, you should just shut down Covalent, go get a job. This is never going to work out. You just need one person to have that belief and the conviction in you. And so Sandeep did that for me. And, today I'm very proud of the success that they've reached there with the COVID relief and all of the stuff, how they've uplifted India's Web3 ecosystem is remarkable, right? And they 100% deserve all of that recognition. So beautiful to see, how that whole entire ecosystem has thrived. And it comes from a very good heart, right? They're in it to really step up the game. They're not short-term thinkers. They're very bullish on the space. They don't really care about bear market, bull market, doesn't matter. All the FUD, will just melt away if you have and stick to your conviction. So that's the third project that I'm very, very bullish on.
Fantastic. It's great how you brought 3 different projects across the spectrum and how you attach different utility to each of them. So I would just like to step away a little bit away from the project side. And as everyone says, right, Web3 is a closely knit community, always very welcoming to newer audience. So talking about networking and community building, what value does networking hold for you in a relatively new and growing Web3 space?
It's a great question. So don't underestimate the value of events, real life events. It's a massive leverage that you can have if you're entering the ecosystem for the first time. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are. You can literally go to a local meetup or a conference or anything of that nature. Especially a lot of these conferences are free if you're a builder. So all of the ETH events, like ETH global events, like ETH New York, ETH Bangalore, which is happening in December of this year, ETH SF, ETH Waterloo, they're all free for builders. So definitely, I would encourage your audience to go visit one of those meetups, one of those hackathons. Go out there. It's a very, very supportive, very inclusive kind of culture. I have no reason to be a part of that community, but I feel like I'm very welcome. I've given talks at that community and they were all very receptive. I can reach out to anyone. A lot of these guys have the DMs open on Twitter. So you can just reach out to, it doesn't matter if they're a big investor or a big like successful founder, doesn't really matter. They're always receptive to giving you feedback or jumping on a call to understand how, whether your project has legs. And so, yeah, I think, but the onus is on you to do that outreach. No one is going to really come to you because the space is very noisy. There's a lot going on. So you need to go and go to these meetups and make those connects. And the networks are rich for sure.
Absolutely. I think it's important to jump into the space, get your hands there, and only then you can get deep into it, understand, network, and communicate with the right set of people. So
sorry, one more thing. Just take you as an example, right? You cold DM me on Twitter and here we are doing a podcast. So that's what it is, right? It's not, it just takes that first like outreach.
Absolutely. Just would want to follow up from there itself, right? There's still a large set of people questioning the real value driving crypto assets and the utility of decentralized applications, which I think is majorly due to a clear knowledge gap and a lack of basic understanding of the tech and the ecosystem being built around it. So a lot of useful things you shared, but apart from that, what advice would you share with people wanting to explore blockchain technology or Web3 space as maybe creators, builders, or even investors?
Absolutely. So I can give some advice to retail investors. So retail investors are usually at a disadvantage in the sense that they don't have the technical expertise to evaluate projects on their merit. They don't have any kind of leverage to talk to the founding teams. So they just go by word of mouth or what they see on Twitter. And a lot of times it doesn't end well, right? And that is very unfortunate and very sad. So just 2 points that they need to consider to keep themselves safe. One is don't invest what you cannot afford to lose. What that means is that don't take a mortgage or a loan or put your house down as a collateral to invest in crypto assets, because if you were to lose that, that's very, very bad. So don't invest what you cannot afford to lose, right? Don't take your investment and your education and put it into a speculative asset, for example, right? So that is like step number one. Step number two is do portfolio diversification or de-risking. What that means is that don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Anything can happen to one of these assets. You know, they could have a major hack, like we saw in the case of UST and Luna. Literally in like 2 days, it went down to zero. And this is a $40 billion network that just evaporated overnight. That's a very bad story, very sad story, right? Lots and lots of retail lost their money. So diversify yourself, right? Just because something promises, you know, in the case of Luna, it promised 20% APR, which is, you know, too good to be true. And that's really what happened there, right? So diversify yourself, you know, don't invest in like put all your eggs in one basket. Just be very methodical, very disciplined, and spread out your risk and do that. So that's the 2 things that I would recommend. But at the end of the day, it's research, research, research. Go to credible people. A lot of people on Twitter are just, for lack of a better word, chilling their own bags. So you don't know who's independent, who's not independent. That's how those markets work. But if you practice these 2, good hygiene with point 1, not investing more than what you cannot afford to lose, and diversifying yourself, you should be relatively secure.
Lovely. I think that's 2 useful pieces of advice that one should keep in mind before they get started here. With that, I would like to thank you for sharing these key insights with us and for this enriching conversation. There is so much to learn from you and a project like Covalent. Digital asset markets, as we know, run round the clock, involving interaction between multiple exchanges, blockchains, and protocols. Hence, there is an abundance of complex and fragmented data, which has been ever growing. That is essentially where Covalent steps in to ace this opportunity and be a one-stop solution for accessing data from across multiple blockchains. Truly a commendable job being done. So once again, thank you so much, Ganesh, for being a part of CuratedX, and we wish you all the best for a successful future for Covalent.
Thank you, Chavi, for the conversation. Really enjoyed it.